My name is Constance. I'm 79 years old, and I spent 256 days in a place that slowly turned my music into silence. I'm going to tell you what really happens inside a nursing home and how I finally walked out with my own 2 hands on the keys again. But before I tell you how I left, you need to understand how I got there. Because nobody decides one morning to trade their piano for a plastic chair and a schedule. I lived alone for 19 years after my husband passed. I was a piano teacher for 41 years, and even after retirement, the music never stopped. The house had my old upright right in the front room, where the afternoon light hit the keys just right. Every evening at 6:30, I sat down and played whatever my hands remembered. Hymns from childhood, ragtime my students once begged for, the slow movements of Beethoven that still made my chest ache. I fed the birds on the back porch every single morning, kept a little spiral notebook counting how many cardinals showed up each week. I still gave lessons to 3 neighborhood children on Saturday mornings. They paid me in drawings and stories, and sometimes a jar of jam. I could still walk the 3 blocks to the corner market, still balance the checkbook at the kitchen table, still feel like Constance when the notes filled the empty rooms. Then the arthritis settled deep into my fingers. The keys started to feel like small knives. One night I woke up thirsty, tried to stand, and my knee buckled. I lay on the hardwood floor until the sun came up, calling out until the neighbor heard. My son Thomas and his wife drove me to the hospital. The doctor said physical therapy would help the weakness. Thomas said the nursing home had a strong rehab program. Just 30 days, Mom, intensive sessions, then you're back home stronger. I agreed because 30 days sounded like a bridge I could cross. I packed 1 small suitcase with nightgowns, my worn copy of favorite sheet music, and the little metronome I had carried since my first teaching job. I thought I would be home before the cardinals finished their spring nesting. It was not 30 days. On day 32, they moved me from the rehab wing to the long-term floor without telling me first. Thomas had already signed the extension forms while I was in a therapy session. He said it was for my safety, that the house was too much now. The new room had 5 steps from the bed to the narrow closet. I counted them every morning when I woke up. Breakfast arrived at 6:30 on a tray with oatmeal the color of cardboard and coffee that was already cold. Medication at 7. Group physical therapy at 8:30, where they handed out rubber balls and made us squeeze them while singing nursery rhymes over a tinny speaker. Lunch at 11. Afternoon activities meant sitting in a circle coloring pictures of flowers none of us had planted. Dinner at 4:30. Lights encouraged off by 8:30. Encouraged meant a flashlight beam under the door if you stayed awake reading. You stop being the woman who taught children how to find middle C. You become the resident in room 112 who needs help buttoning her own sweater. The hallways smelled of overcooked green beans and the sharp chemical bite of laundry soap that never quite covered the other layer underneath. After 29 days, you stop noticing the smell. That is when the place begins to own you. I sat at the same table every meal with 3 other women. Most of the aides were decent, overworked, rushing between call lights. One aide named Maria would sometimes pause long enough to ask what I used to play. She treated me like a person who once had songs. But Maria had 17 residents, and the shift changed every week. So faces blurred into strangers who lifted me, washed me, and moved on. One of the women at my table was Dorothy, 82, who used to paint watercolors of the mountains. When I first met her, she could describe every shade of blue in the sky she once captured on paper. 3 months later, she sat with her hands folded and said the colors had all leaked out of her head. Another woman, Beatrice, 80, had grown vegetables her whole life. She used to tell me about the exact day her tomatoes ripened. Now she whispered to the plastic plant on the windowsill, like it might bloom if she asked nicely enough. I watch them fade the way a piano goes out of tune, one string at a time, until the whole instrument sounds wrong. I kept counting, 5 steps to the closet. 18 times a day, the overhead speaker crackled with announcements for bingo or medication pass. 12 pills in the little white cup every morning. 4 cardinals I could sometimes spot from the window on good days. 0 minutes when I could sit at a real piano and play without someone telling me it was not activity time. I almost stopped counting after Beatrice started talking to the plastic leaves. Almost stopped believing the music was still inside me. But on day 198, something shifted in the middle of the night. The power went out across the whole building. Emergency lights flickered on, and the usual noise of carts and televisions stopped. The quiet felt like the first real breath I had taken in months. I slipped out of bed, found my way to the activity room in the dark, and sat at the old, out-of-tune upright they kept locked during the day. My fingers were stiff, but I played anyway, soft, just Amazing Grace in the lowest register, so no one would hear. The notes came back like old friends. A night shift aide found me there. Instead of scolding, she stood and listened until the song ended. The next morning, she told a young volunteer about it. That volunteer was Sophie, 24, studying social work. She had been coming twice a week to help with games. When she heard I used to teach piano, she asked if I would play for her one afternoon. I did. She listened the way my students once did, eyes wide. Sophie was not family. She was not paid to care beyond her hours. But she started bringing me extra sheet music she printed from her laptop. She asked questions about my old lessons, about the cardinals, about the way music used to fill my house. One afternoon she said, "Mrs. Constance, you don't belong here. There's a new program this year through the state, expanded home support for people who can live independently with some help. In-home therapy, a few hours of assistance each week. I can help you apply." It took her 9 weeks of phone calls and forms and meetings with case managers. Thomas said I was being stubborn. His wife said maybe the facility was the right place now. Sophie kept coming anyway. She found a way to get the paperwork in front of the right person at the elder rights office. She found a physical therapist who would come to my house 3 times a week, and a retired teacher who could sit with me 4 afternoons so I would not be alone. Not luxury, just enough so the music could come back. Nobody at the facility had ever mentioned the program existed. They sold beds, not doors. The day I left, I stood in my own front room and counted 11 steps from the piano bench to the back porch, where the bird feeder still hung. The house smelled dusty, and the keys needed tuning, but the piano was still there. Sophie came the first afternoon with a small bag of groceries and her laptop. We sat together while I played something simple. She hummed along, terrible pitch, but she smiled the whole time. I laughed for the first time in months. I am not saying everyone can leave. Some people need the level of care a facility gives, but too many families hear only one story, and they take it because the system does not offer the other chapters. State programs for in-home support, volunteer matches, expanded therapy services that cost a fraction of what those places charge. They exist, especially now in 2026 when new funding opened up. You have to ask the right questions because the building will never hand you the answers. If you have a parent in a facility right now, go visit on a random Thursday afternoon during the so-called activity hour. Watch whether they are still doing the thing that once made them who they were. Ask your mother if she remembers the song she used to play, or the colors she used to paint, or the garden she used to tend. See if her eyes still light up when she talks about it. I am 79. I lived in that place for 256 days. I got out. And every afternoon now, I sit at my own piano at 6:30. The Cardinals come back to the feeder. Sophie stops by twice a week with new music she found online. My fingers are still slow, but the notes belong to me again. The house is quiet except for the music, and that is exactly how it should be. The only thing that matters is that I am Constance once more, one song at a time.